For this video, I'm going to show you guys how to do a few problems, give you a few rules, and then I'm going to want you to pause the video at times and work some problems on your own, and then you can go back and review the video as many times as you want in hopes that you'll have a better understanding of how to do a lot of these different problems. We're going to start with some order of operations problems. At a certain point, my hope is that you become a little bit better with some mental math and you're able to do all of these problems partly in your head. Of course, we want to get some of it on paper, and especially without the use of a calculator. So let's start with number one. Remember, when we're working problems dealing with order of operations, we want to follow PEMDAS. And of course, PEMDAS simply stands for parentheses, exponents, multiplication, division, addition, and subtraction. Of course, multiplication and division have the same power. Addition and subtraction have the same power. In other words, we're going to add and subtract from left to right. So starting with example number 2, even though the A comes before the S in PEMDAS, we are going to take 6 minus 4 before we take 4 plus 11. 6 minus 4 is 2. And then we have 2 plus 11, which gives us 13. If you took this problem literally with PEMDAS and added before you subtracted, you'd get 6 minus 15, which is negative 9 and incorrect. So you have to make sure you understand that PEMDAS, multiplication and division are the same power, addition and subtraction is the same power. Now for problem number 1, we're going to work brackets first, but within the brackets there's parentheses. So before I do 2 plus 2, I need to multiply 3 times 6 to get 18. And then that's a multiplication problem. So within the brackets, we have 2 plus 2 times 18, which is 36. So inside my brackets, I have 2 plus 36 minus 5. 2 plus 36 is the next order of operation we need to perform. 38 minus 5 gives me 33. Now go ahead and pause the video, and I'd like you to work 3 and 4. Those should be pretty simple problems. The next topic of discussion is adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing fractions. And the first thing we need to talk about is the least common denominator. So if I gave you a couple fractions, 1/2 and 1/5, the least common denominator, we are asking basically what number is a multiple of both 2 and 5. So in other words, the multiples of 2 would be 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, and I could keep going on and on. The multiples of 5 would be 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, etc. Obviously, I could keep going there as well. So when I say the least common denominator, that's really the least common multiple in the denominator. So in other words, with these multiples that I've just written in red and blue, which ones are common? Well, I see 10 is common, I see 20 is common, and that's it for what I have written down. Another common multiple would be 30, and then 40, etc. So I want the least common multiple. Well, what's less, 10 or 20? 10. So the least common denominator between 2 and 5 is 10. So when I'm adding and subtracting fractions, I am always going to be finding a least common denominator. Now, a lot of guys are able to do this in their head. So for an example, number 1, you guys are probably looking at 4/5 plus 3/10, and you're saying, okay, I know the least common denominator is 10, which it is. You just did that in your head. So what I need to do is I need to get a denominator of 10 in both fractions in order to add them. Well, 4/5 I can multiply by 2/2 to get a denominator of 10, because I know 2 times 5 is 10. And this is legal because I'm multiplying by 1. 2/2 is a fancy way of writing 1. So instead of saying 4/5, I'm going to say 8/10 plus 3/10. And then remember the rules of adding or subtracting fractions. I only add or subtract the numerators. 8 plus 3 is 11. And then the denominator, I leave alone. 10. 11/10 is my final answer. Now for a problem like number 5, let's take a look at number 5. The first thing I need to do is change 2 4/5 to 14/5. Remember, to change from a mixed number to an improper fraction, I'm going to take 5, the denominator, multiply it by 2, which is 10, and then add the 4 to get 14/5. So 14/5 plus 3/7 is my new problem. In order to add this, I need a common denominator. So one way to get a common denominator is to multiply the two numbers in the denominator together. 5 times 7 is 35. The common denominator is 35. So in order to get that common denominator, I need to multiply 14/5 by 7 over 7, and I need to multiply 3/7 by 5 over 5. And what this does is it gives me the common denominator of 35. So 7 over 7 times 14/5, 7 times 14 is going to be 98. So I'm going to write that down. 98, 7 times 5 in the denominator is 35, minus, plus in this case, 3 times 5, 15. Denominator 7 times 5, 35. My rules again, add only the numerators. 98 plus 15 is 113. Leave that denominator of 35 alone, and that's my final answer. Now go ahead and pause the video and do the other 4 problems remaining. Next up is multiplication and division of fractions. Multiplication is actually probably a little bit easier than adding and subtracting. Let's take a look at a problem like number 9. First off, a problem like number 9, I'm going to want to go ahead and change 1 3/4 from a mixed number to an improper fraction. So again, I need to multiply 4 times 1, and then I'm going to add the 3. 4 times 1 is 4, 4 plus 3 is 7. So I have 7/4 times 4/3. Now, the rules of multiplication tell us we can simply multiply across the numerator, 7 times 4, 28, and then multiply the denominators, 4 times 3, 12. But you notice 28/12 can be reduced. So what makes multiplication a little bit easier sometimes is I can reduce before I multiply. And the good news is with multiplication, I can reduce either fraction. In other words, I can take the 4 in the second numerator and I can reduce that with the 4 in the first denominator. 4 over 4 reduces to 1 over 1. And so in this problem, I simply take 7 times 1 in the numerator to get 7, 1 times 3 in the denominator to get 7/3. Well, you'll notice that 7/3 is the same answer as 28/12 I got the first time I multiplied, but the problem is 28/12 is not reduced. I can reduce that. 28 is 4 times 7, 12 is 4 times 3, and you see the 4's cancel again, and we get our answer 7/3. So it's much easier to reduce first, and that's the way I would almost always do multiplication problems with fractions. Now below we have 3 division problems. The rules for division, if you remember, we use the phrase copy, dot, flip. What that means, and I'm going to do problem number 11, you are going to copy the first fraction, and instead of dividing, you are going to multiply by the reciprocal. Multiply is the dot. The reciprocal means we are going to flip 2/9 and make it 9/2. So now in this problem, we now can reduce because it's a multiplication problem. 9 is 3 times 3. 6 is 3 times 2. I am simply going to cancel 1 3 in the denominator with 1 3 in the numerator, and I end up with the numerator of 5 times 3, 15, 2 times 2 in the denominator, 4, 15/4 is my answer. So go ahead and pause the video and work the other 4 problems. Now that little basic review leads me to some of the problems that we really struggle with in Chapter 3. Chapter 3, we had fractions within our equations. So let's focus in on problem number 18. I have 1/7 minus 3/2 x equals 3/4 x plus 2. If it makes you feel better, you might want to put a 1 underneath the 2. The denominator there is 1. So the first question you have to ask yourself is, how am I going to get rid of all those denominators? The 7, the 2, the 4, and the 1. Well, the best answer for that is find the least common denominator. And the least common denominator, if I can write LCD down, would be, in this example, 28. So what I'm going to do, and this is a little different from what we've done before, I am going to multiply every single fraction by 28. Now, this is really where your mental math capabilities are going to be super important. You're going to be able to want to do a lot of this in your head. And if you can't, you're going to have to write it down, and it's going to take you a lot longer. The reason it is legal for me to multiply by 28 is because I am multiplying the 28 by both the left side and the right side of our equation, our equal sign. Remember, it's balancing an equation. Whatever we do on the left, if we do it on the right side, it's legal. So the first thing we need to do is multiply 28 times 1/7. Now, this is something that I would do in my head, but just for the sake of showing you, we're going to take 28 times 1/7. And you'll see 28 is 7 times 4, and the 7's are going to cancel. 28 times 1/7 is 4. And then I'm going to bring my minus sign down. Here's the minus sign, I just brought it down. And now, let's see if we can do 28 times 3/2 in our head. What I would do is I would take 28 divided by 2. 28 divided by 2 is 14. 14 times 3. Can we do that in our head? 14 times 3, 42. And don't forget to carry down the x. So 4 minus 42x equals, now we need to multiply 28 by 3/4. Again, mental math. Can you take 28 times 3/4? Well, let's start with 28 divided by 4, which is 7, and then we're going to multiply 7 by the numerator of 3. 7 times 3 is 21x plus 28 times our last number 2, 2 over 1. 28 times 2 is 56. Now, what you've noticed is when I multiply by the least common denominator, I no longer have fractions. That is what the least common denominator does for me. It gets rid of all the fractions. Now I have an equation that I can work with. Remember, with our equations, we want to get all the x's on one side. So since I like to work with positive numbers, I'm going to add 42x to both sides. Negative 42x plus 42x is gone, and I get 4 equals 42 plus 21 is 63x, plus of course my 56. And I'm running out of space here, but I'll rewrite my problem right over here. 4 equals 63x plus 56. The next step, of course, is to subtract 56 from both sides. 4 minus 56 is negative 52 equals 63x. And then, of course, to solve for x, we need to divide both sides by 63. And that's my final answer. Negative 52 over 63. X equals negative 52 over 63. You can go ahead and pause the video and work the other 3 problems.